Welcome to The Hill's Coronavirus Report. I'm Steve Clemons, editor-at-large of The Hill. Each day we are interviewing consequential leaders and innovators in the battle against the coronavirus. If you read the headlines, you'll constantly see one thing. Those hardest hit by this virus tend to be those who were already on the brink. Underlying conditions, if you will. Poor and working class seem to bear a lot of the burden with this illness. Wallet Hub recently ranked West Virginia the most vulnerable state to COVID-19. The study considered age, homelessness, and poverty. As of yesterday, West Virginia had 59 deaths, 6 new cases, and more than 1,400 positive cases. Although the positive rate is below 3%, any case is not looked upon lightly with so many other challenges. One beleaguered population is West Virginia miners. And this week, a bipartisan group of senators introduced the COVID-19 Mine Worker Protection Act, which would require an emergency standard to protect miners from exposure at work, while forbidding mine operators from retaliating against miners who report an infection. Joining me now is the Democratic senator from the great state of West Virginia. He's one of the sponsors of that bill. Senator Manchin currently serves as the ranking member of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee and also serves on the Senate Committee on Appropriations, the Senate Committee on Armed Services, and the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. That's a ton of committees. Welcome, Senator Manchin. Thanks for joining us on this very important topic. And let me just start out and ask you, just point blank, what has the Congress gotten right in responding to the COVID crisis, and what has it gotten not right?
Oh boy. Well, I think the early action, basically trying to find put finances in place that would help people, that has been good, even though it's been slow. Sometimes the PPP program didn't work the way we thought it should work. We told them from day one, you don't understand rural areas, you don't understand poverty, you don't understand Appalachia. You've got to have set-asides for these rural areas, for the underserved area, for the poverty-stricken areas. If you don't, they get nothing. So even though we talk a good game up here, Steve, and everyone has a big heart wanting to help people who are on the low end of the socioeconomic ladder, when the plan comes out, it's usually a Wall Street plan. And I told Mitch McConnell, we had an argument on the floor, a little debate on the floor, when the CARES Act came out. The first 2 acts that came out, totally bipartisan. None, unanimous consent, totally bipartisan. The third bill, when it got about $2 trillion, became real money, Steve. Then you had a situation where Mitch did it all himself on the Republican side. He just did a bill. And when I looked at the bill, I said, Senator, in all due respect, this bill was written by Wall Street, not for Main Street. There's nothing set aside for the small areas, for small businesses, for rural areas. There was nothing set aside for the states that weren't going to be able to maintain the services that people depend on. And we took an extra 2 or 3 days debating to finally get that to be a bipartisan bill. Then you had the 3.5, which was the fourth bill. Now you have a big proposal of 1,800 pages and $3 trillion, which we're going through that, and we haven't seen it all yet, but it's a heavy lift.
When you say the words $3 trillion, I can kind of feel the stress in your voice. Is this a time to be thinking about fiscal responsibility when you have this big a challenge in the country? Or do we just need to blow through this, put money in every corner of the country and move along? Because, I've seen some Republicans say, with a straight face, that this is the time we need fiscal responsibility and we can't blow the bank.
Yeah, they've never thought about that before. When it comes time to bail out the banks and bail out all the and the tax cuts for the corporations, they didn't hesitate on that. There was no fiscal responsibility there. The bottom line is that everyone's guilty. Everyone's throwing caution to the wind. Let me tell you what bothers me more than anything. How much do you actually hear the discussion going on? What have we done for the National Institute of Health, NIH? What have we done to invest in the CDC, into our research and technology labs? They've been eviscerated over the years. The budget years have been cut. What have we done to build them back up to make sure that we find a cure and hopefully accelerate a vaccine? And next of all, prepare for the next pandemic so that we don't be caught like we have. What have we done basically to try to pass any type of a corporate responsibility on manufacturing back in the United States, such as medical devices? How did we get cut so short? Why are we dependent on so many foreign countries for the defense of our country and the medical defense of our country? Those are the things we're not talking about, and we're not looking at how much money or investment needs to be made there. We're looking at it the socio side, economics, trying to keep people from falling through the cracks, Steve, which is
Right.
our responsibility, but it has to be balanced.
Well, you've just brought a lot of things in the conversation, supply chains, medical devices, active agents in drugs, and also investing in the science ecosystem to get these drugs. So let me just ask you honestly, I mean, you're on a lot of the committees there. Is there anything going on that's credible right now that begins to look at these as strategic deficits in the country that need to be addressed?
Well, you would think that after we spent $3 trillion, and we've been here, the Senate's been here for 2 weeks. Mitch called us back last week. This is the second week we were here without the House being here. So someone says, well, now they want to hit the pause button. I said that Mitch McConnell, leading the Senate Republicans, has already hit the pause button. We just didn't do anything. We should have been having virtual meetings or real meetings, if you will, to evaluate every aspect of the money that we put out. Call in Mnuchin, call in some of the people basically on the front lines that were making the decision to how much money needed to go in what direction to help the economy and help basically stave off a depression. We didn't have any accountability there. We don't know really, except for what we hear from our front lines in West Virginia, what worked, what didn't work, what money got to where it got to and didn't get to, what they're still waiting on. Give you a perfect example. The PPP 8-week process. You remember that? If you go ahead and you keep all the employees, 75% of the money you borrow go towards your employees, keeping them on the payroll. 25% can go through for your expenses.
Right.
You're supposed to keep everything ready to go back into business when it's opened up. So you keep them on the payroll. There's no business because we told you to shut down. So you're shut down, Steve. And as things start gradually opening up now, your 8 weeks come due. Well, the 8 weeks come due, and basically you want your loan forgiven. Okay. Now you have not enough business to keep everybody that you kept on the payroll when you had the loan. So we said extend that to 16 weeks. We did unemployment for 16 weeks. Doesn't it make sense to give a person a chance to keep all those people working as they build their business back up? Little things. Those are not big cost items, just common sense items. That's what we're trying to get through. And we're not having any meetings trying to find a solution and trying to fix maybe what didn't work. Money that we maybe there was abuse and fraud that we could stop and make sure that we're able to keep they're able to survive.
Well, we've had 2 days of just horrible news. Yesterday, Jay Powell, the chairman of the Fed, said that 40% of families with a home income of less than $40,000 are out of jobs. And then today we saw the numbers, 3 million more people, 36.5 million people officially unemployed at this moment, probably more when you look at hybrid jobs and gig jobs and partially employed. So I guess the question is, what are your colleagues missing in understanding that the burden of this time is extraordinary for that low-income bracket, which is a giant footprint in the country? Yeah,
the low-income bracket always gets hit the hardest and gets hit first and takes the longest to recover. It always has been through history. With that, I always felt that the people that lost their job because they were told to close down and the people that had to shut their business should have been kept whole. So they should have gotten their full payroll. For whatever time it took us till we were able to ask people to come back to where we had enough tests to make sure. If you're asking a person to go back to work and you're saying, okay, once you go back to work, you have to report back, we're opening back up. They're going to say, fine. Has everybody been tested? I want to be tested. And I want every one of my colleagues to be tested. I don't want to go back into an environment that I don't know is virus free. And on top of that, I want to make sure that I have the necessary equipment to be safe, whether it be the gloves, whether it be the gowns, whether it be the face mask, or whether it be the face shields. That should be all made available if you're asking people to go back into harm's way. Now, we've talked about heroes pay. What about people we're asking to go back to work and they're not protected? Aren't they heroes too? So doesn't make any sense, Steve. And then in West Virginia, we've done 67,000 tests. We have 1,800,000 people. In the United States of America, we've done about 9.5 million tests out of 328 million people. That's nowhere near, and we don't have the capacity to basically make sure that we're keeping an availability to where we can identify a hot spot, be able to have a whole army of tracers to trace everybody who had contact to make sure all they were tested, so we can shut down and quarantine an area that needs to be so the spread doesn't grow again. We're not doing any of that, and why we cannot get the president to do the Defense Production Act, I don't know, Steve. It makes no sense to me. at all. The Defense Production Act, everybody in this country, every manufacturer has the ability to make PPEs, every ability to make the test and be able to do that should be mandated by the federal government to do it. And the government should have total acceptability for this and access to it so they can distribute it in the states. I have a state that has the highest vulnerability of elderly and underlying conditions, health conditions. If it hits my state, it'll be like a tsunami. The bottom line, it saves us. It's a very rural state. We don't have one town or one city over 50,000 population. So we already have social distancing, the only saving grace. But let me say one thing, Stephen, you and I have talked about this before. When you take a poverty-stricken or underprivileged area or poverty-stricken and challenged area, the thing those people have is social gatherings. That's what fulfills their life, with their family, with their friends, with their church meetings, church gatherings. All of those have been discontinued. There's very little for someone who's socially challenged, economically challenged, in an area that has been hard hit to begin with before the pandemic, to have any type of a quality of life unless we get the testing that can allow them to start moving around, unless we can get the protection, unless we find a cure and a vaccine that protects them. So it's going to be difficult to get back to full
So when
strength.
you hear from the President of the United States, we got more than enough tests out there, anybody who wants a test can get a test, what's your answer?
He's totally wrong. He is absolutely wrong. You ask people, I have people all over West Virginia call me and said, Joe, I need a test. I want to get a test. They says, well, bring your insurance card and get your doctor's referral. These are people that use emergency rooms. They don't have a family physician. And you want them to get a doctor's referral before you'll test them?
Right.
Come on. And we've put so much money towards this. And now they're saying, so I'm telling everybody, you go and get tested. If they refuse you, you call me immediately. Call my office. We have all of our staff totally readily available. We're working in all 55 counties. This is a bunch of crock, and we've got to get through this. And I've got a governor that's still sitting on $1.25 billion that we made available for every state. The smallest states, 21 states, got the minimum of 1.25. Okay? Some of those states are still sitting on it. Ours is still saying they're hoping they're going to get relief to where they can use part of it. I want them to have flexibility to be able to balance their shortfalls. But the other $500 or $600 million could go out to all the counties and all the municipalities that are having extreme difficulties in keeping all their services up. First responders, healthcare, basically police protection, sanitation, all these things. So they better get off on the ball here and get things moving.
Senator, just in our last minute or so, I know that you're in the middle of the tug of war between those that are concerned about the safety of the workplace, returning to work, getting back to those social gatherings, and then the other side of it, which is reopening the economy. And we heard Dr. Fauci yet testify in the Senate yesterday and saying, hey, we've got problems out there. We've got to open very cautiously. We need better health protocols and standards to begin doing this. He worries about universities and schools. And the president came out and sort of, whacked him, said that he disagrees strongly with what Fauci testified. So how is this tension playing out in West Virginia? How do you think we can resolve it?
I tell everybody that I speak to, do not pay attention to any of us in the political arena. We do not know what we're talking about when it comes to science, unless someone is a scientist or a medical doctor that happens to be serving in a political position. So that's the first advice I can give any human being. Believe the professionals, the doctors, the scientists. And that's what Dr. Fauci is talking about. What we're saying is that we're fine. We want to start partially opening. And we know it's going to be a slow roll, Steve. But with that, we have to be testing as we slow roll. We have to be protecting as we slow roll. If we see a spike from an area where we have an opening, then we have to be able to test and trace, and then test again to make sure it hasn't spread. That's only common sense. If you're not prepared to do that, then you better be prepared, as Dr. Fauci says, to have a relapse. I don't know how else to explain and tell people other than common sense. I don't know if someone's coming into my place of business. If we told a restaurant to open, I got the beauty shops opening. Now we have tanning salons. I really don't know. But if we're testing people that are operating there and we see a spike and somebody gets it who's the proprietor or working there, and then we test and trace the people, their clients and customers, and then we make sure it hasn't spread, that's the way we can. If it does, we can contain it. We're not prepared to do that because we don't have the testing capability. And everyone's bragging about, well, I'm less than 3%. Well, you've tested 60,000 people out of 1.8 million. You haven't really gone into the poor communities. Finally, we got the National Guard to go in and start testing in our minority communities and the poor neighborhoods. Steve, that's the only way they're going to get tested.
Well, we'll leave it there. I just want to say, I really admire the resilience and the creativity of the people of West Virginia. You and I have talked about this many, many times. And so, Senator Joe Manchin, thank you so much for joining us today on the Coronavirus Report. And I want to thank all of you for joining me today. We'll see you tomorrow. I'm Steve Clemons. Be well.